GRAMA, Public Access to Records at the Utah Attorney General's Office. Hello, I'm Richard Pyatt, and this is Legally Speaking. Our office releases thousands of public records every year in accordance with the Government Records Access and Management Act, GRAMA. But not all the documents our office generates are available to the public. They're specifically not public. There are confidentiality and privacy concerns that could cause harm to people and the cases we're handling if that information were to be released in those cases. That's why the GRAMA process exists. It gives us a way to handle requests with care and to release only what is appropriate. Joining me to discuss this process is Lonny Pearson, our GRAMA Coordinator. Thanks for joining us, Lonny.
Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on being the attorney of the second quarter. Congratulations. This is 2024. I know you guys work really hard, and I'd like to congratulate you on that honor.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was a great honor and a real surprise. You know, we have the opportunity to work with people throughout the office, and I know there's so many hardworking attorneys in our office that handle so many pressing matters, and so it's a real honor for me to get that reward.
Yeah, well, congratulations again. So when it comes to accessing public records through GRAMA, can you explain what people can get and what they can't get?
Sure. You know, GRAMA has a fundamental presumption that all records are public. They're presumed public unless otherwise specifically classified. And so there's three primary classifications of non-public records under GRAMA. And the first is private. And so those are records that can only be accessed by the subject of the record, who might have a privacy interest if they were released. Second category is controlled records, and those are records that are private, but if released to the subject of the record, they could be harmful to them, so they're controlled. But the third category is the big one, and that's protected records. And that's cases where releasing the record might impact some other important public interest. So currently there are about 88 categories of protected records under our GRAMA statute, and it covers a whole range of different types of records. For instance, records related to ongoing enforcement, investigations, where if those records were released, it might impair the legal proceedings or the investigation. For instance, records regarding litigation strategy or maybe attorney work product and attorney-client privilege materials. Those are ones that we deal with a lot in our office.
So typically, how much work does this generate for the office? What's the process of gathering and releasing the information?
You know, it really depends a lot on the type of request that we're dealing with. Many of our requests, unlike other government entities, involve steps to processing one of our GRAMA requests. And of course, first is identifying who the record's custodians are. Our office has 20 divisions. Hundreds of attorneys. So first we have to identify who might have the records dealing with that request. And then the next step is identifying and gathering those responsive records. You know, I think there's a misperception that records are just readily available in a filing cabinet or that they can be Googled. Unfortunately, that's not the case. While that's certainly our goal, we have many different records keeping systems. And the next step would be reviewing the records that we retrieve for classification. And this can be a very time-consuming process. You know, we're required to redact information that might be private or that can't be released while still releasing as much of the record as we possibly can. And then the last step is just compiling everything and sending it out.
So we do receive a lot of requests from reporters who are doing stories and who ask for documents that they can't, like you said, Google or get easily or anywhere else. But who else makes GRAMA requests? Can the general public ask for something for whatever purpose? Or do they have to state why they're asking for the record, or can they just get it?
Yeah, that's a good question. You're right. We do receive a lot of requests from the media. And one thing I should mention is that typically media requests are expedited, which means they get put kind of to the head of the line. And that sometimes requires that other requests that are not expedited kind of be pushed back some. But, you know, we've seen a real trend lately of litigants in litigation with the office seeking records under our Government Records Access Management Act. And, you know, this really puts a big burden on our office to try and both litigate the case and also release the records under GRAMA. You know, many jurisdictions have laws that in their sunshine law, they prohibit using their sunshine law for releasing for litigation type requests. Unfortunately, our statute does not have that provision, but that's something that we've been looking at for litigation purposes. We also receive quite a few requests from like government watchdog groups or individuals or entities. Most of those have kind of a specific issue or topic that they're most concerned about. But we also have a fair number of requests from people just seeking records related to their own cases or matters before our office.
So could you tell me a little bit more about the statutory guidelines about what kinds of documents can be released? Does the legislature guide that, or is that like a federal law, or how does that usually work?
Those statutes or orders would control and would trump GRAMA. For instance, there's specific provisions related to records of DCFS, or for instance, criminal background type of records. There's also federal statutes like HIPAA and FERPA that limit access to records. And sometimes there might be a court order in place that limits accessing records related to a certain case. So all of those scenarios are ones where access to the records would be governed by the specific statute in place there rather than GRAMA itself.
So are there limits to the kinds of requests that can be made? In other words, does a request need to be for specific information?
Yeah, that's a good point. GRAMA provides that, a records request must identify the records sought with reasonable specificity. And that means that an ordinary records custodian in our office who's just looking at the face of the request should be able to look at it and understand, okay, I know what records they're looking for. But you also raise an important distinction, and that is that GRAMA deals with records and not just information. So often we'll receive requests that ask for certain information, answers to certain questions, and that's not really what the GRAMA process is intended to deal with. Whether a certain record supports or proves a certain position, that's often kind of a subjective determination. And so it makes it really difficult for a records custodian to say, okay, that's what they're after. So the focus needs to be on the specific record sought rather than the information.
Right. Could you go into a little bit more detail on the difference between information and a record? For example, if someone has a beef with the office and they're trying to make a case against us, and they say, well, we want our case is one of many. I know this happens, in your office, and so I want to look at every case that you've done like this between 1998 and the present day, so that they can make a case. That would be considered more of a request for information, right?
Right, and I would think that wouldn't be reasonably specific as required under the statute. And we do receive quite a few requests like that, and typically we'll try and work with the requester to narrow down, okay, what records are you seeking rather than information? I mean, we do have processes for receiving information from our office, but the GRAMA process is directed specifically at records. So we need to help them identify what records you're seeking that might contain the information that you're looking for.
So what kinds of suggestions do you have for someone who's filing a GRAMA request, not just to this agency, but to another agency, statewide?
Well, first, I would recommend that they go online and review all of the great resources that are available there. Most of the governmental entities have information about how to file GRAMA requests. That includes our office. And it's important to direct your request to the right governmental entity. There is no central clearinghouse for records requests in the state. And sometimes people misunderstand our office as that sort of a central clearinghouse. But in fact, you need to direct it to the specific agency. The Division of Archives, the Office of the Government Records Ombudsman also has some really good resources online. So I think people would be well served to look at their website as well. And I think I would recommend that people keep in mind that, a government entity can charge a reasonable fee to access records. So if you're filing a really, really broad request, you may be required to charge a fee. Whereas if you narrow or limit that request to what you really need, you can avoid some of those costs and probably get a response much sooner. And probably the last thing I would point out is just keep in mind that government employees are just citizens and ordinary people like everyone else. We have a job to do, but we also have a stake in our democracy and want to provide information to the best of our ability. And, that's what we're here for.
So I know that transparency within the limits of the law is important to the office, and so GRAMA is actually kind of a nice way to to fulfill that mission, but still comply with the law. Do you see it? Do you see it that way? Am I approximating what your mission is in the GRAMA department?
Yeah, absolutely. That is our goal, to provide the public with access to the records that we can, while also protecting those important public interests that might mandate withholding records in certain cases. And sometimes that can be tricky, but we try our very best to release the records that we can.
Okay, very good, very, very enlightening. That's all I have for you today, Lonny. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us on Legally Speaking. We'll talk to you next time.